My wife got pregnant while my best friend was living with us, but they didn't know I had a secret vasectomy. Our life took a sudden turn when Annie announced she was pregnant. It should have been a moment of pure joy, but for me, it was a shock laced with suspicion. You see, I had a secret I never shared with Annie, a vasectomy I underwent years ago. It was a decision we made together after our second child, but now her pregnancy cast doubts that clawed at my mind like relentless shadows. Brian, my best friend since college, had fallen on hard times and moved in with us. At first, I welcomed the chance to help him, but soon his presence became a source of unease. He was always there, a little too attentive to Annie's needs, a little too eager to lend a hand. Annie glowed with happiness as her pregnancy progressed, her belly swelling with new life. But each kick felt like a reminder of the uncertainty gnawing at me. I watched them closely, Annie, with her radiant smile, and Brian, with his lingering gazes that spoke volumes left unspoken. One evening, I returned home earlier than usual from work. The house was quiet, too quiet. As I approached our bedroom, muffled voices drifted through the closed door. I hesitated, my hand poised to open it, fear and disbelief warring within me. Voices, soft, intimate, filtered through the wood, igniting a storm of emotions. My heart raced as I pressed closer, desperate to deny the truth that loomed like a specter before me. But there was no denying the words that seeped through the cracks. "I love you," Annie's voice, tinged with a vulnerability I had never heard before. "And I love you," came Brian's reply, filled with a raw intensity that shattered the fragile facade of my perfect life. I stumbled back, the weight of their words crashing down upon me. Numbness enveloped me, shielding me from the searing pain threatening to consume my soul. I turned and fled, leaving behind a world that had suddenly become alien and hostile. The days that followed the revelation were a haze of uncertainty and inner turmoil for me. Each glance between Annie and Brian, once innocent in my eyes, now felt laden with unspoken meanings. Whispered conversations ceased abruptly when I entered a room, leaving a lingering unease in their wake. Annie's pregnancy advanced with each passing week, her glow contrasting sharply with my deepening suspicion. I found myself watching them closely, observing their interactions with a detective's eye. Brian's attentiveness, once a welcome comfort in our shared space, now fueled my growing doubts. One evening, unable to shake the gnawing feeling in my gut, I made a decision. I quietly slipped out of the house, leaving Annie and Brian behind in the dimly lit living room. The night air was cool against my skin as I walked aimlessly through familiar streets, lost in thought and grappling with the weight of my discovery. Questions swirled in my mind like a relentless storm. Should I confront Annie and Brian, demanding answers to the questions that plagued me day and night? Or should I gather more evidence, unwilling to confront the truth until I had irrefutable proof? Weeks passed in a tense silence. My resolve to uncover the truth battled against my fear of what I might discover. I scrutinized every phone call, every outing they shared, searching for any clue that could confirm or dispel my suspicions. Meanwhile, Annie's belly swelled with new life, a constant reminder of the fractured trust between us. I struggled to reconcile the joy of impending fatherhood with the betrayal that threatened to unravel our marriage. Sleepless nights became my new normal, haunted by visions of Annie and Brian together, their laughter echoing like a bitter refrain in my mind. One afternoon, while sorting through a stack of papers in the study, I stumbled upon an old photograph hidden among the clutter. It was a candid shot taken during a summer barbecue, a snapshot frozen in time, capturing Annie and Brian sharing a private joke by the grill. Their smiles, once a testament to their shared camaraderie, now felt like a cruel mockery of my naivety. My heart clenched in my chest as I stared at the photograph, a wave of betrayal crashing over me once more. Anger simmered beneath the surface, mingling with a profound sense of loss. How could Annie, my beloved wife, and Brian, my closest friend, betray me so callously? With trembling hands, I tucked the photograph into my pocket and left the study, my mind made up. It was time to confront Annie and Brian, to demand the truth that had eluded me for too long. The weight of my decision settled heavily on my shoulders as I ascended the stairs to our bedroom, steeling myself for the confrontation that would either shatter my world or set me free. As I reached the door, voices drifted through the wood, soft, urgent whispers that sent a chill down my spine. I paused, my hand hovering over the doorknob, my pulse racing in my ears. Taking a deep breath, I gathered my resolve and pushed the door open. Inside, Annie and Brian stood frozen, their eyes wide with shock as they turned to face me. The air crackled with tension, thick with unspoken words and buried secrets. My gaze flickered between them, my heart pounding in my chest. "Mark," Annie began, her voice trembling with guilt and apprehension. Before she could say another word, I held up the photograph, my voice steady despite the storm raging within me. "I want the truth," I demanded, my words cutting through the silence like a blade. Annie's eyes filled with tears, her hands trembling at her sides. Brian shifted uncomfortably, his jaw clenched in a futile attempt to mask his own guilt. The room seemed to close in around us, trapping us in a web of deceit from which there was no escape. I'm sorry, Annie whispered, her voice barely audible above the pounding of my heart. I didn't mean for this to happen. My chest tightened at her words, a surge of betrayal threatening to overwhelm me. I took a step closer, my eyes never leaving Annie's tear-streaked face. Didn't mean for what to happen? I asked, my voice low and controlled despite the turmoil raging within me. Annie glanced at Brian, her expression torn between fear and resignation. Brian swallowed hard, his own guilt written plainly across his features. We fell in love, Brian confessed, his voice hoarse with emotion. It wasn't planned, Mark. It just happened. I staggered back as if struck, my mind reeling from the revelation. My grip tightened on the photograph, the edges digging into my palm. The truth, once a distant suspicion, now lay bare before me, a betrayal that cut deeper than I could have imagined. The room spun around me as I struggled to process the magnitude of their confession. Annie's tearful eyes pleaded for understanding, while Brian stood silently, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Without a word, I turned and fled from the room, the weight of their betrayal crushing me with each step. I stumbled down the stairs, the world blurring into a haze of pain and confusion. Outside, the cool night air offered no solace as I collapsed onto the front steps, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Everything I believed in had shattered in an instant, my marriage, my friendship, my very sense of self. In the darkness, I wrestled with a torrent of emotions, each wave threatening to drown me in despair. Hours passed before I finally rose to my feet, my resolve hardening like steel within me. I couldn't stay here, not anymore. With a heavy heart, I retreated to the sanctuary of my car and drove away into the night, leaving behind a life that had become a shattered reflection of what once was. The days following the confrontation blurred together in a haze of pain and disbelief for me. I retreated into a solitary existence, seeking solace in the quiet solitude of a small rented apartment on the outskirts of town. The walls echoed with memories of a life shattered, a life I had believed was built on love and trust, now reduced to fragments of broken promises. Annie's tear-streaked face haunted me day and night, her anguished confession echoing in my mind like a relentless refrain. I replayed our last moments together over and over, searching for answers in the tangled web of lies and betrayal that had unraveled our marriage. Weeks turned into months as I grappled with the aftermath of Annie's infidelity. Her apologies, once fervent and desperate, now rang hollow in my ears. Brian's feeble attempts at reconciliation only served to deepen the wounds that scarred my heart. One fateful evening, unable to escape the memories that haunted me, I returned home earlier than usual. The house was eerily silent as I ascended the stairs to our bedroom, the air thick with unspoken tension. Voices, soft, murmured, drifted through the closed door like a haunting melody. My steps faltered, the weight of impending truth settling heavily upon me. With trembling hands, I pressed my ear against the wood, every fiber of my being praying that what I heard was a figment of my imagination. But there was no denying the truth. "I'm sorry, Brian," Annie's voice, tinged with regret and longing, filtered through the silence. "I never meant to hurt him," Brian replied, his words laced with a sadness that cut me to the core. My heart pounded in my chest as I pushed open the door, my breath catching in my throat at the sight before me. Annie and Brian stood frozen, their embrace a stark testament to the betrayal that had torn through our marriage. For a moment, time stood still, a suspended tableau of pain and betrayal etched into the very fabric of our shared history. Annie's eyes widened in shock as she met my gaze, her hand trembling against Brian's chest. Brian's expression wavered between guilt and resignation, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "Mark," Annie began, her voice a fragile whisper that hung in the air between us. My voice was steady, a stark contrast to the turmoil raging within me. "How long?" I asked, my words cutting through the suffocating silence. Annie hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. "It started a few months after Brian moved in," she admitted, her voice barely audible above the pounding of my heart. "And you didn't think to tell me?" My voice rose, thick with anger and betrayal. "All this time, pretending everything was fine?" Annie's lower lip trembled, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I didn't know how to tell you," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "I was scared, Mark. Scared of losing you." Brian shifted uncomfortably beside her, his eyes filled with remorse. "I'm sorry, Mark," he interjected, his voice thick with guilt. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I never meant to come between you." My chest tightened at Brian's words, a surge of anger coursing through me. "But you did," I replied, my voice cold and unforgiving. "You both did." Annie reached out to me, her fingers brushing against my arm. "Please, Mark," she pleaded, her voice desperate. "I love you. I never stopped loving you." I pulled away, the sting of her touch burning like a brand on my skin. Love isn't enough, I said quietly, my words heavy with finality. Not anymore. Silence descended upon the room, broken only by the sound of Annie's soft sobs and the distant echo of my retreating footsteps. I left them standing there, their guilt and regret a heavy weight upon my shoulders as I descended the stairs and walked out into the night. Outside, the cool evening air offered no solace as I wrestled with the shattered pieces of my life. The stars above seemed indifferent to my pain, their distant light a cruel reminder of the vastness of the universe and the insignificance of my own suffering. Hours passed before I found myself standing at the edge of a deserted pier, the water below a dark, swirling abyss. I stared out into the night, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions, anger, sadness, and a profound sense of loss. Memories of Annie flooded my mind, her laughter, her warmth, the way she had once looked at me with adoration in her eyes. But now, those memories were tainted by betrayal, overshadowed by the stark reality of her infidelity. A part of me wanted to scream, to lash out at the unfairness of it all. But another part, the part that still loved Annie despite everything, ached with a deep longing for what once was, for the life we had built together. As the first light of dawn painted the sky in hues of pink and gold, I made a decision. With a heavy heart, I turned away from the edge of the pier and walked back towards the life I had left behind, a life forever altered by the shadows of doubt that had torn through my world. Months stretched into a blur of days and nights where anger and heartbreak were my constant companions. Leaving Annie behind was a decision weighted with pain, but the betrayal had cleaved a divide between us that seemed insurmountable. In the quiet solitude of my new apartment, the walls echoed with memories of what once was, of Annie's laughter, her warmth, and the dreams we had shared. But those echoes now mingled with the bitter taste of deceit, each memory tainted by the knowledge of her infidelity. Annie's attempts to reach out came like waves crashing against the shore of my resolve. Text messages, voicemails, even letters, all went unanswered. Each attempt at reconciliation felt like reopening a wound that had barely begun to heal. I couldn't bring myself to face her, couldn't bear the sight of the woman I had loved more than life itself, now forever changed in my eyes. Instead, I threw myself into work, burying my pain beneath the relentless pursuit of distractions. The days blurred together, a monotonous routine of meetings and deadlines, a hollow semblance of normalcy in a life turned upside down. Yet, no matter how occupied my mind appeared, thoughts of Annie and the children, their innocent faces, their laughter, haunted my every waking moment. The weekends were the hardest. Alone in my apartment, the silence pressed in around me like a suffocating embrace. I avoided places we had frequented together, unable to bear the memories they held. Instead, I wandered aimlessly through unfamiliar streets, seeking solace in the anonymity of crowded cafes and bustling markets. Yet amid the turmoil, one constant remained, the ache of longing for my children. Every picture on my phone, every drawing they had made for me, was a bittersweet reminder of what I had lost. I yearned to hold them, to hear their laughter ring through the air once more. But each time I picked up the phone to call, the weight of unanswered questions held me back. As the seasons changed, so too did my resolve. Anger slowly gave way to a quiet acceptance, a realization that some wounds never fully heal. Annie had been my anchor, my confidant, for so many years. The thought of life without her felt like a gaping void, yet the betrayal had shattered the foundation of trust upon which our marriage had been built. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon in a blaze of orange and gold, I found myself standing before a familiar park, the place where Annie and I had once shared picnics and stolen moments of happiness. The memory of her laughter, the feel of her hand in mine, washed over me like a tidal wave of emotions. A figure approached from across the park, a small silhouette against the fading light. It was Annie, her steps hesitant as she drew nearer. My heart clenched at the sight of her, the pain of our shared history etched into every line of her face. "Mark," she called softly, her voice carrying across the distance between us. I wanted to turn away, to walk in the opposite direction and leave behind the turmoil that threatened to engulf me once more. But her gaze held mine, a plea for forgiveness, for understanding, that pierced through the walls I had erected around my heart. I took a tentative step forward, the distance between us shrinking with each beat of my heart. "Annie," I murmured, my voice rough with emotion. Tears welled in her eyes as she reached out, her fingers brushing against my hand. "I miss you," she whispered, her voice trembling with sincerity. I closed my eyes, the weight of her touch a poignant reminder of the love we had once shared. "I miss you too," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. For a moment, we stood there, two souls adrift in a sea of regrets and shattered dreams. The park around us faded into insignificance, the world narrowing to the space between us and the fragile threads of hope that still bound us together. But as the stars emerged in the darkening sky above, casting their gentle light upon us, I knew that forgiveness wouldn't come easily. Trust, once broken, couldn't be mended with mere words. And yet, amid the pain and uncertainty, a flicker of hope ignited within me, a tentative belief that perhaps, someday, we could find a way back to each other. As we walked away from the park that evening, our footsteps fell into a hesitant rhythm, a journey of healing and forgiveness that stretched out before us, uncertain yet filled with the promise of redemption. For the sake of our children, and for the love that had once bound us together, I dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, our story wasn't over yet. The letter arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning, nestled between bills and advertisements in the mailbox. Annie's familiar handwriting adorned the envelope, stirring a whirlwind of conflicting emotions within me. For days, I wrestled with the decision to open it, fearing the flood of memories and pain it might unleash. But in the quiet solitude of my apartment, with rain drumming against the windowpanes like an echo of my own turmoil, I found myself breaking the seal. The words spilled forth in a rush of emotions, apologies, regrets, and a plea for forgiveness that tugged at the frayed edges of my heart. Annie begged for a chance to explain, to face me one last time and lay bare the truth that had torn us apart. Reluctantly, against the protests of my wounded pride, I agreed to meet her in a small cafe, a place where we had once shared stolen moments of laughter and whispered promises. The air between us was heavy with unspoken words as I arrived early, my gaze fixed on the rain-streaked window. When Annie walked in, her eyes searching mine with a mixture of hope and trepidation, my resolve wavered. "Mark," she breathed, her voice a fragile whisper that hung between us. I nodded, a silent acknowledgement of the tumultuous journey that had brought us to this moment. We sat in a secluded corner, the cafe bustling with life around us, yet we existed in a bubble of our own making, two souls adrift in a sea of regrets and shattered dreams. Annie's hands trembled as she reached across the table, her fingers brushing against mine. "I'm sorry," she began, her voice thick with emotion. "For everything." I searched her eyes, seeking the truth hidden behind the veil of tears. "Tell me," I urged softly, my voice betraying the ache in my heart. "Tell me why." Her confession unfolded like a fragile tapestry of truths and regrets. Annie spoke of loneliness, of misplaced desires, and the fragile thread of vulnerability that had led her astray. She spoke of Brian, a friend turned lover, their bond forged in moments of shared laughter and unspoken yearning. "And the child?" I asked quietly, the weight of her words settling heavily upon me. Annie's gaze faltered, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's Brian's," she admitted, her admission a dagger to my already wounded heart. Silence stretched between us, a chasm of pain and regret that threatened to engulf us both. Yet amid the turmoil, a flicker of something, forgiveness, perhaps, or the remnants of a love that refused to die, stirred within me. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I confessed, my voice raw with emotion. "But for the sake of our children, I'm willing to try." Annie's eyes widened in disbelief, hope blossoming anew in their depths. "Mark," she whispered, her voice trembling with gratitude. The cafe faded into insignificance as we sat there, two broken souls grappling with the wreckage of our shared history. I knew that forgiving Annie wouldn't erase the pain, nor would it mend the shattered trust that lay between us like jagged fragments of glass. But for the first time since our world had unraveled, I dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way back to each other. In the days and weeks that followed, Annie worked tirelessly to rebuild what had been lost. Her efforts were a testament to her remorse and her love, a fragile bridge spanning the chasm that had threatened to swallow us whole. We navigated our days with cautious optimism, each moment a step towards healing and forgiveness. The children, oblivious to the storm that had rocked their world, became our anchor in the turbulent sea of emotions. Their laughter, their innocent questions, reminded us of the love that had once bound us together, a love worth fighting for, despite the scars that marked our journey. And so, our story unfolded, a tale of redemption and resilience, of forgiveness found in the midst of pain. The wounds healed slowly, leaving behind scars that bore witness to our shared history. But amid the shadows of doubt and uncertainty, a flicker of hope burned bright, a promise of a future rebuilt on the foundation of a love that refused to be extinguished. As the video faded to black, scenes of us, Annie and I, tentatively rebuilding our relationship played out against a backdrop of hope and healing. The journey ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges and obstacles yet to be faced. But together, hand in hand, we dared to believe that our love could weather the storm, stronger and more resilient than before. As I sit here, reflecting on the tumultuous journey that has brought Annie and me to this point, I can't help but marvel at the resilience of love. Our story, a tapestry woven with threads of betrayal, forgiveness, and redemption, has taught me more about the depths of human emotion than I ever thought possible. Betrayal is a heavy burden to bear. It fractures trust, leaving behind shards of doubt and pain that pierce the very core of one's being. When I discovered Annie's affair with Brian, the ground beneath me seemed to give way. The pillars upon which I had built my life, love, trust, and friendship, crumbled in an instant, leaving me adrift in a sea of uncertainty. But in the depths of despair, I found a glimmer of hope, a flicker of love that refused to be extinguished. For the sake of our children and the memories we had shared, I chose to confront the difficult truths that threatened to tear us apart. Forgiveness, though elusive and often painful, became my lifeline, a bridge back to the woman I had once loved with all my heart. Our journey to reconciliation was fraught with challenges. Annie's remorse and efforts to rebuild our fractured trust were met with my own hesitations and fears. Yet, in each tentative step forward, I glimpsed the possibility of a future where love could endure, scarred but resilient, tested but unbroken. Today, as I look into the camera, I share this story not as a tale of triumph over adversity, but as a testament to the power of forgiveness and understanding in relationships. We live in a world where truths, both beautiful and painful, shape the landscapes of our hearts. Confronting those truths, however daunting, is the first step towards healing and renewal. Love, I've learned, is not flawless. It is messy and imperfect, yet therein lies its strength. It's in the moments of vulnerability and grace that love finds its truest form, a beacon of hope amidst the storms that threaten to engulf us. To anyone watching who may find themselves grappling with betrayal or doubt, I offer this: hold fast to the belief that love, though tested, can endure. It requires courage to confront the shadows that haunt our relationships, but in doing so, we uncover the resilience that lies within us. Annie and I have embarked on a journey towards rebuilding our trust, our love, and our shared future. It's a journey that continues to unfold with each passing day, reminding us that while scars may linger, they bear witness to the strength of our commitment and the depth of our love. So, here's to embracing the complexities of love, to confronting difficult truths with grace and compassion, and to believing in the transformative power of forgiveness. Our story is a testament to the enduring nature of love, a love that, against all odds, has found its way back to each other. As the camera fades to black, I turn to Annie, my hand reaching out to hers, and I know with unwavering certainty that together, we will face whatever lies ahead.